Welcome back, everybody. Degenerates, having fun again here at Vaquero Taquero, your authentic Austin 6th Street cantina. We're here with Mando from United Tacos of America.
That's right, United Tacos of America, Tacos of Texas, taco journalists. If you don't see something out there, you have to give yourself the title that you want.
For sure, man. I'm liking all these taco journalist conversations because I'm like, man, the more food that I get, the better. You know what I mean?
Right. But too bad, like, the kitchen's closed today, though.
I know. But thank you to Miguel for opening up this spot for us for today. Always good to like be part of a community that supports each other. You know what I mean?
Andale,
so what are we doing today, dude? We're doing taco takes or what?
Yeah, no, we're just having a big old conversation on taco culture. We're in Texas. Tacos were here before Texas was Texas, right? This was Mexico. And so there's a lot of history. There's a lot of stories, here in the state of Texas, whether they're restaurant workers, kitchen workers, taqueros, tortilleras. And for me, that's like, we got to honor those experiences.
For sure. Why don't we start with you?
All right.
Let's do... Tell us who you are. Where can we find you? What's your MO? Taco journalist, you know what I mean? Talk us through the entire gambit so people can get to know you and then can go follow you also, separately. But let's get onto you and then we'll get onto the whole the history.
Yeah, órale. Well, I'm the host and the producer of the Tacos of Texas podcast, and I do have my own production company called Identity Productions, and we have our partnership with KUTX and KUT Austin here in Austin, Texas. And I'm on a monthly program on Texas Standard, and I talk about all these themes that are happening, whether they're hot trends to digging into the culture, some of the history, and then under that or part of that is United Tacos of America on Instagram. And so before that, there was a couple books, before that, even way before Yelp. So now it's a 20-year overnight success story, bro. And so it was like back in the day when people used to blog, right? That's how I started writing, because I saw that the cultura wasn't really represented right. And so for me, it was super important. And a lot of it was just shtick on the culture. And I'm like, nah, bro, you got to do it right. You got to do it, because what we do, what we provide in kitchens, in our homes, to this place, it has value and worth. And so for me, I was like, hey, we got to tell these stories that feel good. And we're telling the stories, right? And so back in the day, started blogging, then did a book on Austin breakfast tacos and another one on Tacos of Texas with UT Press here in town.
Okay.
And then I started a production company with a partner of mine, Dennis Burnett, good friend, El Flaco Rojo is what we call him. And so he's usually behind the camera. I'm in front of the camera and producer. And so we started telling these stories. We started here in Austin. I'm originally from El Paso, Chuco Town. And, for me, it's like this introduction into food and food culture.
Yeah.
And so, we when we did our our second book, Tacos of Texas, we went to 10 different cities to cover the taco culture, and this was way before anybody had written any books around food. People didn't believe we were writing a book on tacos, right?
They just thought you were free food.
What?
They just thought we're trying to get free food. We're writing a book.
No, not at all, right? So that whole idea, it was because we were asking the restaurant workers. We were asking somebody's tia, somebody's abuela. It wasn't like a celebrity chef. Oh, look, let's talk to the celebrity chef because they're doing great things,
right,
and whatnot. And there is a space for that. But for me, it was about how do we get these stories of my tia and my tios that showed me how to make carnitas in the rancho, right, and I had to transcribe what a puño de sal is, you know what I mean, and into a cookbook, right? And so I wanted to make sure that we honored those stories that right?
Of course,
stories that you grew up with,
of course,
but maybe don't get written about or don't get shine the light on, right?
Right.
And so we did that, and then after that, we did a PBS series with the same namesake, Tacos of Texas, and we went to different, different cities, Corpus, San Antonio, Brownsville, El Paso, Dallas, you name it, and infused the culture. And culture, like when you think about tacos, it's not just about the food, right?
Yeah.
And it's about the cultura, it's about the music, about the experiences. So we're talking about like
the community, yeah.
The community, right? And
yeah.
so we've always like featured like, the cultura, like taco adjacent things like the cumbias, right?
Norteña,
and the norteño music, but also like the histories of our people, and anyway, so and then El Rey hit us up one day and on Facebook, if you can imagine that.
That's crazy,
right? Yeah, with Robert Rodriguez's studio, and we did United Tacos of America, and that was a TV show. You can still watch it on Roku.
There you go.
And so we went to like the big cities, went to like LA and Chicago and New York,
that's dope.
Pero también Kentucky. And New Orleans. And we, for every story that we tell, we have to trace the story of the immigrant. Porque ahí, that's where the food starts, right? And so whether you're like a 7th generation Tejano or you just recently arrived, you're doing something for this community, and we want to capture and tell those stories.
I could not agree more. That is like, I mean, over the past year and a half, that's what our brand has been catering to, is like we have to tell these stories. We have to try to get a timeline of the way that our people have impacted culture, have permeated pop culture, have changed the dynamics and the tapestry of America as a whole. And it doesn't get its just due because of, every 4 years there's an immigration conversation. Right. Every 4 years there's like a protectionist conversation of America and the borders and things like that. So for me, it's fascinating that this conversation, or that people like you have been really doing this work for a very, very, very long period of time. So it's an honor on my end to sit down with you, because I just recently got on this venture because I felt like it was a need. We originally started just talking shit, and we wanted to just like have fun with our friends, and then the more and more that we kept on like pulling at that thread, the more we realized, holy shit, like we know our story intimately, because it just like lives inside us in a lot of ways. But people don't know this story. People don't know, you know what I mean? And then there's like these weird moments, at least for me, there's these weird moments where it feels very jarring, because it'll be like, no, immigrants are bad, immigrants are this and that. I'm like, immigrants just cooked your food.
Yeah, right.
Like immigrants just, like, you just said queso. You were walking around eating chips and guac. Like immigrants didn't provide that experience for you. Or the immigrants didn't bring that with them. Or, So anyway, aside, we don't have to get into that realm. But in general, big props to you and all of the efforts in your company and everything that you've been doing to try to keep that conversation alive, because I think it's important, and documenting it is incredibly important. And in a lot of ways, when people use the word undocumented, I don't really think about illegal. I think about our story just hasn't been properly documented. We're not in the history books. We're not in the, they don't talk about Latinos when it comes to American history all that often. They don't talk about how much of an impact that we've made. They don't talk about how borders crossed us and not the other way around. Like, so anyway.
There's a danger of a single story. And that's, I think, a lot of people, when they think of Latinos in the United States, they have like this idea of what we are, but we are a complex people. We're not the same.
Yeah, we're not a monolith.
And so you and I have very different experiences. Me growing up in West Texas, you growing up in Houston, and now we're here in Austin, right? So it's completely different. So the complexities there, I would say, and understanding like the where food comes from, the ingredients, who picks that food for you, and as you're enjoying that food, right, are you giving props to like like the immigrant labor, the migrant farm worker, but also the restaurant workers. And that's super important, you know, like you just, you know, for me, it's like you have to honor where that food comes from, right? And so, and then also like, you know, dig in. You know, we always say that we use the tacos as a Trojan horse to understand communities and issues and all that. Pero so that way people can have this broader context and more complexity to what immigrants are, what Latinos are, whether you're from Mexico, Central America, South America, or you were born in the United States, you know, multi-generational. And so that's kind of like, for me, that's why we have to tell more stories.
For sure.
Right? Because if you only have this idea of what, you know, you see out in the media or you see it like in Hollywood or whatever, you know, for a long time, we're like, Latinos have been gangsters and you know, yard workers and all that. No, pero we're more than that.
Yeah, shout out to John Leguizamo.
He's been doing a great job.
He's such a like a pioneer in like being a huge voice for that. For fighting against that trope of that Hollywood stereotype of Latinos, you know what I mean? So shout out to John. He's a he's a dream guest for the pod for sure.
So if you're listening to John,
for sure,
come down with the raza.
Sure. Come down with the raza. Let's have a taco. You know what I'm saying? Let's you know we can share some more stories.
Yeah.
So I was just watching this interview. Conversation with Mario Carbone. Do you know who that is?
No, who's that?
Mario Carbone is a really famous chef in New York City. Has, you know, his restaurant in New York is like a staple. All these famous and celebrities go there and stuff like that.
Okay. That comes to me.
And like now he's got like restaurants all over the world. Sure. He's like American Italian, you know, restaurant or whatever, right? But there was something that stuck to me in this conversation, and he said that Mexican food is the most complex food. Something to don't butcher, don't come at me if I get it wrong, right? But something about the Mexican cuisine is the most complicated, and the Mexican chefs are like masters at their craft and this and that, right? And then he went on, like further along in that conversation, he talked about how it was so difficult, and I resonated with this because he's an Italian American. So he was talking about how difficult it is. Actually, let me preface it like this. He did a hot take.
Yeah.
He said American Italian food, fine dining, is better than Italian food, fine dining. However, he said like regular mom and pop Italian shops in the United States are way below the regular mom and pop like cuisine in Italy.
Yeah.
And he was saying that the reason is because Italy has such a rich culture of good food at home that it's really difficult to go out and eat to like a regular restaurant and not compare it to grandma, and not compare it to like what mom's making at home, what dad's making at home, and this and that. So fine dining wise, America all the way up here, it like Italy down here. But then like regular mom and pop Italian American is like way low, and then regular mom and pop is like just below the fine dining because everybody's such a great cook. The ingredients are so good. Everybody,
totally.
Right? And I could not stop thinking about the fact that that's just like Mexico. It's so hard. Like whenever people come to me in the States and they're like, oh my God, this fine dining experience in this Mexico and this and that, I'm like, okay, let me try it. And like rare that I go to like a fine dining Mexican restaurant and I'm like, this was incredible. I'm often at a fine dining Mexican, like high-end Mexican restaurant or like, a concept or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know, bro, but like my grandma could like fuck this up. Like this, like my grandma's mole could just fuck this up hard, right? So it just made me, it makes me, like when I think about food and community and Hispanics, Latino culture, we have such a rich foundation at home of like what it means to be communal, family oriented, and how much food is at the centerpiece of that
it's
experience.
The kitchen table, bro.
The carne asada, el huevito en la mañana. Like just
con chorizo,
doesn't matter, dude. Like some salchicha, some jamón.
Well, you know,
doesn't matter. Go hard, bro. Homemade tortilla. Like there's something about that whole experience that I go to like a regular. It's hard, bro. It's hard. Like the taco experience could be really great when you go out there.
Sure.
Because there's some great taqueros.
Yeah.
Right. But I think for every Mexican, at least I'm gonna speak for Mexicans. Sure. For every Mexican American and Mexican in general, bro, like finding the right taco outside of your home is so hard.
It's hard.
Because we're so particular and and our palate is so unique and it's so specific.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but I think that all of those experiences together, like, is an amalgamation of what our culture is, because we're so passionate about the fact that, like, no. When I go outside, I'm trying to replicate what I get inside.
Yeah. Totally.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm not looking for an experience. Like, when I go to an Italian restaurant here, I'm like, or any other restaurant, I'm like, I'm looking for an experience.
Yeah.
But whenever I go to like a Mexican restaurant, I'm like, can you match the experience that I go back on?
We always do that.
It's a completely different MO. You know what I mean?
But what you're talking about is comida casera, right? And so that's the idea of, like, you know, when we try to, like, what we grew up with is will always be in our, not only in our minds, in our palates, but in our hearts, in our corazones, because of who's making that. You know what I mean? And that's the connection. And so when you try to go out and do something and eat somewhere in another city outside of your own, you're not going to get the same experience, you know, and it's not going to be replicated. And there's some places that I try to replicate that experience, because, like, they might bring in the chiles, might bring in the ingredients, but it's still kind of not the same. Right? And that's why it's so hard that, you know, when people like, oh, well, you know, you gotta like say, for example, the hot take, where do you get,
let's go
where do you get the best tacos in Austin? Well, you have to drive an hour south to San Antonio to do that. Right? So you always hear that, but it is because people from San Antonio, you know, they know what they like. And they grew up with it, and that cannot get replicated in Austin.
Authenticity is
right?
hard to
and so for me too, like, I moved here from El Paso, and I'm like, you know, working the restaurant industry, and then trying out some of the foods, and I'm like, well, you know, I'm used to, like, Mexicano food, right? And so I come over here, and it's like a lot of Tex-Mex, and I love it now, pero back then I was like, well, what is this watered-down Mexican food?
Yeah. Most of the time, it's a hard pass on Tex-Mex for me. Most of the time. It's not like I dislike it. I find it to be, this is not a knock on Tex-Mex food. There's some good Tex-Mex food out there, right? Like, burritos are nice.
Yeah.
But, like, if I'm craving Mexican food, I'm not going to Tex-Mex food.
No.
You know what I mean? I'm not searching for that. You know what I mean? Chips and queso is good.
Yeah, sure.
But like, and people often get surprised, especially American people, when they're like, "Let's go get some chips and queso." I'm like, "That's not Mexican." In Mexico, we don't have the closest thing to chips and queso that we have in Monterrey, where I'm from, is queso flameado.
We have chile con queso, so it's
chile
different.
con queso is a little bit different. But like, whenever I was growing up, I never had chips and queso. Ever. My mom made queso flameado or chorizo con queso flameado or whatever. Like, but and that's the closest thing that we got. So like, when I experienced chips and queso here in Texas, I was like, man, it's good, but like,
sure,
I kind of want some chips and salsa, maybe. Like, I probably want, like, and not even, like, it doesn't even have to be fancy.
Bro,
some tostadas con la Valentina. Like,
I'm like, break them off, bro.
Like, I'm like, you know,
it can be like predetermined triangle shape.
Yeah. So for me, it wasn't even like I was pushing against that culture. It was just like, that's just not my culture.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, it wasn't even like I saw it as like, you're trespassing into what you think Mexican. I didn't even register it as Mexican food.
Yeah.
I'm just like, no, that's y'all. That's like Texan. That's whatever. Like, y'all can have that. I don't need. Like, that's not what we do. In Monterrey. Come to, like, of course, like, I've matured in that take a lot, because then you go to your point, migration patterns and what gets influenced, and like, at some point in the evolution of the chips and queso, we were there. In that evolution. We were there, and we were saying, like,
those recipes came from
100%
our people,
because they were sitting there and capitalism was taking its hold, and they were saying,
right.
how do we cater to this new audience?
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if we went back home, we opened up a restaurant. We know what these people like. We know what to sell. We know what that menu is supposed to look like. This is a brand new take. These are people from all walks of life, from all different parts of the world, with different ancestry, with X, Y, and Z. How do we finesse and tweak our recipes to make sure that like it's easily accessible and palatable to everybody here?
Right.
Even though I didn't register chips and queso as like authentic Mexican.
Yeah.
Latinos did that.
Yeah.
And we need to take credit for that too. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I'm not. Now I'm in both sides of it. You know what I mean?
Well, like the idea of like, when you think about, there's different variations of that is like, corn versus flour, right?
Right.
Or like, like even barbacoa or fajitas, or even a breakfast taco. I didn't eat a breakfast taco until I moved to Austin. Like we had breakfast burritos in El Paso, right? And but not to be confused with the California burritos, right?
Right.
Which is different.
It's very different.
Yeah. And so it's the complexity of like the story of the food and the people. And to be honest, like when you think about Tex-Mex, that thing was like, it was Mexicano, but it was taken, I would say, or even like adapted for the gringos, right? Because they're like, oh, it's too spicy or whatever. Or they'll be like, oh, I love that idea, and I'm going to take it from you. Really, that's what happened.
Wow.
And now I'm gonna package it and put it in a can, and now you have enchiladas and menudo in a can.
Right. Or refried beans in a can. Yeah. Okay. Let's start with the hot takes. What's your favorite kind of taco?
My go-to is al pastor, tacos al pastor.
Bro, we the same, bro. For me, because I'm from Monterrey, so we make the pastor very specifically. But like, for me, like tacos al pastor, tacos de trompo is like that's it, bro. That's it. Like
so.
The pinnacle.
So here's the thing: is my go-to is always a taco al pastor, pero the one I make at home is carnitas.
Got it.
So, carnitas en acaso, and it comes out really, so good, delicious. Like it's rancho style.
Yeah.
And then, but I infuse it with my own ingredients, my own flavors. And
my grandma fucks up some carnitas.
Yeah.
Bro, she fucks it up. I'm like, man, you smell it from a distance, and you're like, ooh, bro, I can't go outside today because I gotta go.
I
gotta eat, bro. When you were a kid and you could smell the carnitas coming, I was like, this happening, bro. Like,
just like if you grew up, with those recipes and the flavors, and like for me, it was like the matanza, and it's like, hey, I can still hear that squeal and oh my, well, ranch living and ranch style,
so different.
It's so different, and pero like we were, I would say like when you think about like this whole farm to table, it didn't start with like organic. Whole Foods, whatever, pero it started at the rancho.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like,
I don't even think that's a hot take.
Yes, yeah.
No, I'm serious. I don't even think that's a hot take. I think that's just like stating the obvious. Yeah. But again, there goes that repurposing, that repackaging, so that they can charge you more for it. So that like Americans don't have to feel like they're doing something bad.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so every time I hear this whole like, oh, it's like farm to free range and this and that. Like when I hear that from like with my like grandma in mind about the rancho, I'm like, what do you mean free range? The chickens are outside, they're not going anywhere. Like, what do you mean? They're on the road, they're on the street, like they're going. You put the seeds out and they come and get it. They lay eggs, and then every now and then grandma comes down and is like, give me a chicken. And then we're gonna make a whole chicken. We make some caldo de pollo. The bones are gonna get used for the broth. They take everything into consideration. Nothing gets wasted. Like, what do you mean? That's farm to table. So I don't know where these terms are coming from, but like.
Just a whole new like way to repackage.
Right. So for me, I'm just like that's just that's just capitalism trying to cater to the audience.
Sure.
And people just trying to feel better about the fact that they aren't buying from like a huge processing plant. You know what I mean?
For sure.
But like farm to table is like, like
OG,
bro. Like we've been farm to table. What are you talking about? You know what I mean?
I mean, when you think about like the story of like, barbacoa, from the barba to the cola, right? Mm-hmm. Or a disco, right? Right?
Discada,
and discada. All that, the casos, and we used everything that we had to make everything. When you think about carnitas, for example, carnitas is everything. It wasn't just like pork butt, and like barbacoa. It's not just beef cheek.
Yeah,
it's todo.
It's every
lengua, even the lengua, like all that. That's the whole. And so that's the idea of like thinking about like some of our stories and going back and we talk about Tex-Mex and like the influx of like the cowboy culture here in Texas, right? Yeah. Where does that come from? It comes from vaqueros, mexicanos.
For sure,
right,
bro.
Right.
We the first cowboys.
Yeah, which was also a mestizaje of the Spanish as well as the indigenous population, ¿verdad?
The Longhorn came from Spain.
Yeah.
Like people don't understand that like the actual Longhorn cow that like UT Texas is known for these Longhorns and these big cattle ranches like. That's a Spanish thing, and it didn't come until after the Spanish, conquered, the what is now Mexico, and then like the immigration pattern started.
Right.
I also think about and I'm gonna get like a little bit more. What's the term I'm looking for? I'm gonna bring it into adjacent culture.
Okay.
Of America. So I'm really big into hip hop. I grew up in Second Ward, Houston. We were growing. It was a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood, but all the adjacent neighborhoods were all black.
Yeah.
I went to I was hanging around a lot of really for my entire childhood all the way up to like mid-teenage years. It was just like Hispanics and black people that I was around.
Yeah.
So like hip hop culture was a huge thing for us, right? And I often empathize a lot because I kind of watched it happen, the like redistribution and repackaging of black culture into pop culture and how they take from black culture and then like you get like the Kim Kardashian, tanning like with black women features, but a white woman is portraying it, and like this fetishization of black features all the way around, right?
Yeah.
And Jay-Z has a line that says, in one of his songs, he says, we lived in the ghetto, and I can't rap, or I don't remember, to the T. But he essentially says, like, we're from the ghetto, and we made soul food. We made, like, we took pig intestines and turned it into soul food. And, and then you came in and gentrified it. It was essentially his thing. And again, there goes for me the parallels. Like that's what we did. We were like nothing goes to waste in the the rancho. Like the whole barbacoa craze right now is like, oh my god, it's like Torchy's has barbacoa tacos, and I'm like
those aren't tacos, bro.
I know, right. But like they have all these like barbabirria, like all this stuff, and I'm like, for us, in a lot of ways, like. That was like the throwaway. Like we just we needed to get the cheek and the tongue and all of that stuff because or else there was no more food.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
It was a necessity.
It was a necessity. It wasn't a trend. It wasn't this like, oh my god, it's exotic, this and that. No. It was like bottom of the barrel. We or maybe that's the wrong term. Not bottom of the barrel, but like making the most out of everything that you can.
Yeah, exactly.
And then like again, sitting it at the table, creating that communal space, and then saying like, no, this is still delicious. And for us, just like black people, to take, the pig intestines and turn it into soul food, to take the barbacoa and the cheek and the tongue, to turn it into something that that tastes delicious and that makes everybody else all over the world, especially here in the United States, be like, oh my god, we gotta try that because that's so different. Like we only think about fajitas, when in Mexico we never say fajita. We say arrachera. We say, you know what I'm saying? So like again, this American habit of taking things that have a cultural and significant value to the way our way of life, and then repackaging and repurposing it, and then not giving it credit or creating an ahistorical context to it where it becomes exotic.
Exactly.
I never get mad at the taquero or the business owner that says, okay, well, I know how to do this. So let's make a pork. Like, let's create everything. Let's make like a carnitas and sell it to all these gringos and like like I never get mad at the hustle. You know what I mean?
Right.
But what does sometimes get under my skin is whenever I am in passing watching people talk about it as like it's this next craze and big thing.
Yeah. Or a new thing.
Yeah. And
it's new to them.
Right. And then I'm just like, wait, what?
They moved on from the bologna sandwich, bro.
Right, exactly. From the applesauce sandwich. So then, like, it always just sits a little bit off center for me because I'm just like, no. Like, I'm actually both glad that you're trying it because it's delicious.
Yeah.
But also, like, I kind of want you to know about the history.
Yeah.
I kind of want you to know about where it comes from. This and because you can trace back a fucking cacio e pepe, like to Italy, and be like, no, that's why this is a classic dish.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? And like like bolognese, and like you can trace it back to like why it's a classic dish, and they give the respect where it's where it's deserved. A classic pomodoro or like this, you know what I mean? And they don't do that with the tacos.
Yeah, no.
And that to me is where I think I find a little bit of the problem area.
Yeah.
Where I get to say, like, I wish there was a better way of creating that like chronology back to where it's due. Because I honestly, I'd like the whole world to get it.
Yeah, totally.
Because I'm proud of our culture.
Right.
But I don't want to be invisible.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want our people to be invisible while other people are partaking in the things that we've pioneered and innovated with, because it kept us from dying. It kept us from you know what I mean? It kept us from like, having that rancho life for our grandmothers and our grandfathers, and it kept the family afloat. It kept everything. It kept us efficient. It kept us, before the city folk turned it into the business empire. This and that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I totally. Like I talked to a lot of like elders that have been around generationally here in Texas, and they're like back in the '60s. They were like, okay, like. We couldn't afford white bread and bologna, so we had a bean and cheese taco. But they had to eat it in hiding. That's what they told us, because they were ostracized for that, right? And then when you think about like two stories, parallel stories that you just brought up, that makes me think of, the whole idea of like barbacoa as well as fajitas, both were throwaway. And now it's like, and then that comes from, like the oil, right? Cooking it underground in a pit is an indigenous practice that we kind of, through time, came up with that, right? And then so you have these throwaway meats that you mentioned, and now they're like all hot. You can get them at your Applebee's or whatever. Right. And then another parallel is barbecue. For a long time, there was a lot of credit given to white pitmasters. Right. But where does that, who fed America for 400 years? Is black slaves and former slaves. And where does that food come from? From black culture. Yeah. And it comes through that. And now you are seeing, that acknowledgement for a long time. The people that were being interviewed around barbecue and around Mexican food were white male chefs. And, and they, instead of like telling the true stories, they would just take credit for their dish. But what does that do to that history? It erases it. Yeah. Right. And so it makes people, our stories, invisible.
Right.
And then a couple podcasts ago, we did a story on taco gentrification in East Austin, where on Cesar Chavez, on East Cesar Chavez, you can get a taco that's $1.50 at the same road. The end of the same road, you're gonna pay probably like $8 for a taco. Which is now what's the median taco price in Austin now? It's like $5.
Yeah,
$6 It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So the question is, like,
I remember dollar tacos in Houston too. Like we used to have that, tacos that were like, you pull up and it was just a simple basic taco, $1.50. Yeah. Get yourself 2-3 tacos, go home. Like it's not a big deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So the question is like, who are you? Who gets to eat that taco, right? And who is it for? And what access are you giving a customer whether they're $1.50 or you get about 2 tacos, a barbacoa plate at the end of the road for like $20, right?
Yep.
And then as you walk in there, you're gonna see who the clientele is.
Yeah, that's your beef with Torchy's right there.
I mean, I'm just like, the thing is like you gotta acknowledge where the food comes from. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And then if you're just there to sell and hawk and and without that representation, it's not a taco. You know what I mean? It's not Mexican food, and you can't call it something else when the roots of it, where the roots come from. Right?
Got it.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, I don't think that's a hot take at all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I had a hot take about taco culture in general, it's probably that I think Mexican culture. I think Mexican cuisine is the best in the world.
Yeah.
Hands down.
Same.
No problem. Like I went to Italy, I went to France, Spain. Some food is nice.
Yeah.
Of course I didn't go fine dining restaurants or whatever. I've been to New York. Like New York's one of my favorite cities in the world. Yeah. I love eating there. There's a lot of places. I don't get Mexican food in New York. Yeah. I mean, I just saw this interview with Carbone and he's talking about like New York having Mexican restaurants like one of the best and this and that, and I'm like I almost can guarantee, I've never been, but I can guarantee that I'll probably go there and I'd probably be like it's fine for New York, sure. But like Mexican cuisine in general overall period over the entire world, I'm like I don't think y'all could touch it. I don't think anybody can touch it. I think that's my hot take to the world, not just to like us or whatever, right? Like I know Tokyo's got like its thing. Japan is like really serious about what they do. Sure. Props to Japan. I really like Japanese culture also. I'm sure Polynesia has its thing. I'm sure. I mean, when I think about like Philippines and like in Thailand and street food in Thailand, I'm sure there's some shit that slaps over there. This shit is so good.
So you got to appreciate like not only do you have to appreciate like the cuisine and whatever city, whatever country you're in, but the culture. Mm-hmm. You cannot separate the two. And I would say like maybe that, I don't know. I mean, it's not a hot take, but for me, I don't think it's a hot take, but you cannot separate the food from the culture.
Yeah.
You got to have both. And if you're like, right now in these times that you're anti-immigrant and you're eating Mexican food, I don't know if you should be eating that food.
Yeah. It feels disrespectful.
Yeah.
It feels, if you're anti-immigrant and you're eating dishes that come from the immigrant experience, that have a history with the immigrant experience, it feels predatory.
Yeah, predatory, disrespectful.
Yeah, it feels predatory and disrespectful because you're more than happy to take what we have to offer, but not the person.
Right, exactly.
You know what I mean? You're more than happy to take our practices, our talent, our cuisine, our taste palettes, our history, and the product that it gives you. Yeah. But you just don't want to associate it with how we look like and who we are and our experience in general. It's like stay in the back of the house. You know what I mean? That's what it feels like. It's like, no, bring us the stuff, but stay in the back. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And that's what it feels like overall, in a gesture like quality. I know that I know that there might be a lot of people that there's nuances to that. Yeah. And like, by no means am I saying that like if you voted Republican, you're being disrespectful to immigrants, because there's a lot of like Latinos that voted Republican.
Yeah, sure.
This past election cycle, which y'all looking kind of dumb right now, but it's all it's all on you, man. Like people are allowed to look dumb. I get it. If you want to call that a hot take, that's a hot take. But I'm not saying that there's not nuance to it, but that's the feeling that it provokes. Yeah. Whenever you are deeply tied to tradition or deeply tied to heritage and culture, or at least acknowledge the fact that it comes from a very specific place. Yeah. Let's keep going with the hot takes. California or Texas?
Oh, dude, I'm gonna go with Texas because we are. If you eat through all of Texas, you've eaten half the tacos in the United States.
Yeah.
You know, like I love LA. LA,
San
Diego, bomb tacos, right?
Yeah, SoCal makes some good tacos.
Yeah. But when you think about Houston, you think about Bronzeville,
yeah.
Chucotown,
McAllen.
you know, McAllen. I mean, you know, even you know, Oak Cliff in Dallas, and it is Mexicanos are everywhere, you know, and so for us, like we've been here. And so, you know, it's different, definitely different than I would say the California style for sure. Pero, you know, we're kind of seeing all the influx of like when you go to the Pulga, you know, like you get like here's a hot take for me is like you can't go to one or two places in the city and say, oh, that city's tacos are trash.
Yeah.
You know, because how are you gonna say that when you haven't explored like all of this? And as well as like, you know, are you pulling up for Mexicanos and Central Americans and immigrants?
Yeah.
When you say that, right? If you say tacos are trash in the city, you know, you're trashing people's income, people's hard work, people's recipes. And, you know, and I'm not talking about, you know, like the Torchies of the world. I'm talking about like mom and pop shops.
Yeah,
you know, because they're the ones that feed the city, right? They're the ones that feed and nourish everybody. And so that's kind of like, for me, it's like, you know, you can't, you know, like, I always say I always have love for almost every city. That's why we explored, you know, Kentucky and New Orleans.
Yeah.
When
Chicago's got some dope ass Mexican food.
Oh yeah. Well, I love Chicago because, you know, if you go to Pilsen or La Villita, you're really not gonna get any queso there, right?
Right.
Because there's like this direct line from Michoacan to Chicago, and they skip the Tex-Mex, the Tex-Mex queso.
And good for them.
Yeah.
And good for them.
Yeah.
They're all the better for it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I like the California versus Texas conversation because I think that it's a perfect amalgam of the different regions of Mexico. And for me, like, as much as the banter is really fun, as much as the banter is like really great to just go back and forth, and Californians are very passionate and Texans are very passionate and this and that. At the bottom of it all, I can acknowledge, like, here's the credit where it's due. Like, so SoCal's got some amazing food.
Yeah.
Right? But at the bottom, for me, the underlayer is still pride because it's still Mexico.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I'm like, bro, like, we're having these internal, these, it's like siblings fighting. Like, we're having these, like, you know, like my older brother did this and my younger brother, you know what I mean? We're having these little conversations here and there, and it's cute and it's fine or whatever. Yeah. But at the bottom of it all, it's like mom and dad built this shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And what we're really arguing about is like how good our parents are, for metaphorically speaking, did their job. Like that's our culture at the bottom of it all. And we are again permeating American culture, the United States of America, in a way that is subtle and deliberate, but also in a lot of ways invisible. Yeah. And those conversations to me are just like little spotlights on like, oh, like this is our impact. Yeah. It's our, like, we've impacted almost every single part of this country through their stomach.
Yeah, totally.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Through everything.
Yeah, well, outside of Mexican restaurants and taco shops and whatever, you know, like you mentioned, Italian restaurants, French restaurants, American bistros, y todo eso. You know who's behind that is Mexicanos and Central Americans working the kitchens. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's like, you know, you go to a nice Italian fine dining place, you're going to see immigrant restaurant
labor
work.
In the back,
and so
the bus
like
boy,
exactly.
Everybody.
You know, so I think that's why, you know, like this year has been hard for a lot of Latinos and immigrants. So you know, we did with Bodega Visual, who's creative geniuses, designers here in Austin, Texas. We did a Know Your Rights campaign. So that way, you know, with Vaquero Taquero, we had like little zines and then posters, you know, posters of like, Know Your Rights. So here's the thing is like, there's a lot of stuff online. It's great. Pero what happens when ICE comes knocking down your door?
Yeah.
You're at work, right? Are you going to be like Googling? No, you're not. And so we created these posters that you can...
like cheat sheets, yeah.
Yeah, you can look on the daily, so that way it's a constant reminder, and it's in the back of a kitchen.
And also, like, if this was 3 months ago, it'd be like, yeah, that's important. But now it's important for everybody. Because what this administration has shown is that they're comfortable even getting citizens the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
if you don't look like them,
it's game. Like, you're at risk.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So for me, it's important for in general for everybody to know this stuff at this point.
Yeah, at this
right?
point,
And this goes back to my point about how like a lot of these Latino Republicans looking goofy as fuck right now because I'm like, nah, bro, it'll happen. It might happen to you.
It's already happening.
It wouldn't surprise me if before the year is out that we get these stories of MAGA Latinos that are getting denied their rights.
Yeah, exactly.
Their rights to exist in this country for due process and things like that. And again, that's not even subtle. That's like a very deliberate spotlight, very obvious gesture of how they're trying to make us invisible.
Yeah.
In that way, right? Though, like, wanting the cuisine at the table, but you stay in the back of the kitchen. That's a more subtle, like, and it might even be involuntary. It might even be subconscious because of like just slow, tradition. But that's like a deliberate, like in your face,
totally.
like get out.
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
what I mean?
And to be honest, and like for this season, I'm actually looking for a MAGA Latino to come on the show and say, let's have a conversation, and of like, so we can have a better understanding. I have my point of view.
Yeah.
Let me hear your side of it. So, if you're out there, you want to come on the podcast.
I've had, I'm not shy about having conversations with Latinos, with like MAGA Latinos in general. I think the thing that makes it really difficult on my end is one, facilitating time, and like I want to have I want to make sure that like this platform stays as fun as possible. And like, obviously it's irresponsible for me to be Latino to call myself a degenerate, sarcastically, ironically speaking, and not have these uncomfortable conversations. But I also like want to feel like there's integrity there. So I want to make sure that like I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I don't want to have a gotcha moment because the internet is filled with like rage baiting and stuff like that. And then I also want to be factual. Like I also want to be like, I also don't want people to feel apprehensive, and I want to be able to come in and say like, okay, well, you're talking about this, like let's look it up in real time. And facilitate a way to have that experience be a little bit more seamless. And I think that's what I struggle with in terms of trying to find a way. But I mean, there's been people that are like, you need to have a MAGA Latino on, like this and that. I'm like, sure, dude. Like, whenever. Like, I'm more, combative and confrontational when I say it. But in my mind, I always say like, yeah, man. Like, anytime you guys want to get dog walked with facts, I got you. Like, you know what I mean? But I say that like a older brother kind of thing, right? Like when you got a knucklehead brother and you're just like, nah, bro, I gotta set you straight for a second, right? Because at the end of the day, even if we disagree, and even if you on a political level voted against what I might think is your interest and my interest,
sure,
I have a deep love for our people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I have like a really, really, really deep love for the immigrant experience. So even if you make a decision that can be problematic, I want what's best for everybody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it comes from, at least I hope that it comes from that vein, and that it's obvious, because I too much infighting can distract from the overall message, like 30,000 foot view. But yeah, man, if you get a MAGA Latino on, I'm watching that episode for sure.
For me, it's more about whatever you hear out there. For me, it's about curiosity, right? And it's about like, hey, let me understand, let me see that viewpoint, and you're eating our food. your parents made that food, your grandparents made that food. At some point, somebody made that migration, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so, where's the disconnect? That's what I'm curious about. Is where is that disconnect?
Yeah. Where are you failing the?
They say it's $50,000.
Do you think that it's like whenever you're like say Tejanos for example,
sure.
right? Like, do you think that like Tejano, like 7th generation, 8th generation Tejanos, like they're so far removed from the actual migration experience that it's a lot easier for them to not resonate with the like current day Mexican, crossing over, or the immigration experience in general? Like, do you think that their view of themselves is so American centric that it's really uncomfortable for them to see themselves as any other thing? I think that's part of it, but like I want to know your take on it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think part of it is this idea of the way we look and being othered is a thing, right?
Of course.
We're like, hey, I just want to blend in and, not get picked up or being, racially profiled or whatever, right?
Right.
So part of that is like, how can I just integrate and see myself as this ideal American, right? And so part of that is white.
Yeah, for sure.
Our affinity towards whiteness.
Yeah.
And so, some of us, especially in the Latino version, we come in all shapes and sizes, right? And
there is that stereotype, like, as soon as you get your citizenship, you want to act white real quick. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of it, this idea of like blending into this ideal American culture. And it's rooted like way back into like, I would say like, maybe first generation, because like even back then in the 70s and the 80s, and we still hear it, like even with like the No Sabo kids.
Yeah.
It's like, that was all about not teaching children Spanish was this affinity towards whiteness, right? And then we have all these other...
And it was also a survival tactic.
Exactly.
It was also a survival tactic. I get called a no sabo kid all the time, but like it was also a survival tactic because of the fact that in schools you had to learn English, because if you spoke Spanish, you would get...
That was a consequence.
Yeah, it was a consequence, right? They were trying to, again, the erasure of the history. And so it was a survival tactic in the sense that, like, if we wanted to continue being here without any repercussions, they had to acclimate.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
So, I mean, I'm just piggybacking off of what you're saying. You know what I mean?
It's not a simple solution. It's complex for sure. But I think this idea of like how we associate ourselves with our own culture and digging into what we believe our culture is, and you could have like, folks that grew up along the border, and, when you think about like the Valley, they pulled up for Trump. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they did.
And so when you think about like when you go down to the Valley, everybody speaks Spanish. You know what I mean? But this idea that like, well, I'm American and whatever.
Yeah. Or they might be looking at it from an economic standpoint also, because if they're so close to the border, and they might see the immigrant experience as like taking money away from them because of work, because of labor, like, something. They might see it from a very specific kind of lens, and they're being preservationist as opposed to like what we might consider in a big city to be more like racist adjacent, or other adjacent. It might just be like a preservationist nature of trying to like not have to completely change their lifestyle or lose things that they want, which I can empathize with. You know what I mean?
Sure.
However, like, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You vote for even if that's the only trait. This is like, all right, like even if that's the only thing that you want to happen, you also then voted to not have due process,
to hurt your neighbors,
right,
to hurt your family members.
Yeah, you also,
right? So it's like,
right. So
how does that like? How does that make sense?
That's a tough conversation.
So I would say that there's definitely selfishness within that, because are you looking out for your family? for your extended family? Are you looking out for people that live just right outside your home? The people that make food for you, the people that pick the food for you. So for me, it's about understanding this whole complexity of
of the totality of it.
Exactly. And so that's an interesting.
But that's why I think John Leguizamo is doing such a great job, because coupled with what you're saying about like the lack of history is also the lack of pride. You are much more comfortable trying to be white, quote unquote, if you're not proud of who you are.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Nobody that has pride in where they come from and who they are and their heritage is ever going to try to be something that they're not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
It's only the person that doesn't know it, or that maybe knows it is ashamed of it for some reason. There's like some internal self-shame in there. Those are the people that are like, no. I've got to like that instinct of survival tactic comes in. Whereas like, I've grown to look at again a lot of John Leguizamo stuff, and I'm like, bro, like what? Like I should be proud of this.
Like
I know. Whenever I see a white boy telling me like blah 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 blah, go back to this and that, I'm like, oh, actually, like, and I feel like the pride and the like, it's almost like an honor. Like, oh, you don't know? Oh, let me put you on game. Let me put you on game real quick, because apparently you don't know history. Apparently you don't know how much. Like my people have done some shit, right? And to me, that's like a point of pride. I have felt more and more proud of who I am, and less willing to acclimate to anything that doesn't necessarily that I don't necessarily come from. Whereas I think maybe as a kid, again, this is kind of like a weird, at least for me, in my experience, it's not as bad as other people. I have friends that like lived up north, like in the country, and they really felt this, but I didn't. Again, I grew up in like predominantly Hispanic neighborhood, and I grew up in a black neighborhood. So like there was a deep like understanding that we kind of knew who we were, and that we like didn't really apologize for anything. But I could feel it every now and then, especially when I went outside and there was like a different, or other people interacted with me, teachers, when I went to college, that was a big one. When I started traveling outside of like, Houston in general, then I started to feel it. And I was like, oh, this is the feeling that people get, that they run away from.
That uncomfortableness, right?
That there's a huge discomfort there. Yeah. And for me, it has slowly evolved from like, I can see why that was uncomfortable for people, especially like a kid.
Yeah.
But now I just feel like it's my responsibility to be like, oh, I've got to like piggyback on your work, on John Leguizamo's work. I've got to try to provide some context, because we really should be proud of who we are and where we come from and what we've provided to everyone. Yeah,
and so what you're talking about is this idea, a term called code switching, right?
Of course.
When we're together, because we're raza, we can be down and we can talk and be real, like whether it's at home and whatever, our accents come out y todo. And then when we're like in this professional environment, we feel we have to act more white.
Sure.
And so that's called code switch.
Sure.
And for me, like there's certain places for that, but I would say like, no, what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
There's definitely there's like a point of admiration that I have whenever people are like that. I tend to go back and forth. Yeah. Like if I'm in a corporate setting, like I need to get my message across. Sure. I need you to know that like I know what the fuck I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And then eventually like I'll slowly lead you into the fact that like no, I come from this, I come from that. You know what I mean? But the same thing, like I grew up around a lot of black people.
Yeah.
So like the Ebonics and like the hip hop language, like it especially in Houston with our slang, like it can get very evident real quick if I'm talking to like a Houstonian that really,
H-Town.
And for me, I just, again, this goes back to the pride, where most people might look at that and be like, oh, you're being fake.
Yeah.
I'm like, no. I'm being real. I am highlighting the range of my personality.
Right.
I'm highlighting the range of who I am as a person. And in the same way that like when you're with like, if you're with your friend that like is from work, you might not talk about
certain things,
your childhood. But if you hang out with somebody that you grew up with, you might be like, bro, remember when we used to
I know.
Right? So like people have range.
Yeah.
And when code switching comes into the conversation, in my mind, I'm like, no. You just have a range and you're a complex human being. And go for it. Fuck it up. Yeah. You know what I mean?
No, it's funny when you think about like linguistics and the way we speak in where we grew up with, because place is super important, right? Of part of our culture,
of course,
and a lot of that is infused with different cultura, right? And so like for example, along the border, you see this a lot. I've seen it in Laredo, I've seen it in the valley, and in El Paso, in El Paso we say like we speak in song because we go. It kind of goes like that. Yeah. We have a cadence, right? Or we'll be like
I say that about Puerto Ricans.
Yeah, we'll say like something when we're telling a joke and we'll be like, he doesn't, se cree muy, those things. Say that too. Yeah, so like those things like really come out when we're like with our gente, but it's all infused with the different cultura that's around us. And in H-Town, it's like
very different.
When you think about like
shout out to H-Town.
Shout out to H-Town. A-Leaf, the wards. And,
I'm from Second Ward,
Okay. And, the East End. And so it's all part of the cultura, right? Yeah. And then just like going back to the food, when you think about the blending of the food, when you think about like discada, right? It's the disc. But that idea actually came from Chinese railroad workers, right? So they had the train wheels that they used, hammer them into walks, right? Yeah. And then the farmers and the farm workers were, the Mexicanos, they use the tractor tills, ¿verdad? So it's very similar, right? Right. It's very similar. So we kind of like, beg, borrow, and steal from each other as part of that. But we always say like the tacos taste better when you know the story, right?
The taco always tastes better when you know the story. My friend, Mando, I think that's like the perfect place to end. Look, you know what? Go get some tacos. Go research the story because the taco tastes better when you know the story. I like that. That's right. And
follow Tacos of Texas podcast.
Tell everybody where to go.
Yeah.
Right here. That's your camera right here.
Oh, here we go. Tacos of Texas podcast. Anywhere you get your podcast. On Instagram, we're United Tacos of America.
And then you know where to find us, the Degenerates. Quick reminder, we are completely self-funded, so please like, share, subscribe. It goes a long way. You're helping get out a message that we feel is very, very, very important, and then it'll help me and all of us over here at our team to create a more well-rounded experience with hopefully better interviews in different places with great guests. So please like, share, subscribe. It's going to make a huge difference. And we hope that you like and enjoy. See you around. Till next time. Deuce.